before I pass over to Karl, I just wanted to say that given timing, we're going to curtail our workshop a little bit at the end and just kind of have a bit more of an open discussion. So we'll move on to that after Karl's presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Tag, buongiorno, mittag, ohio gozaimasu. Have I missed anybody? So Felicity asked me to talk about barriers to installers, or how we get installers to do more. So I've been installing heat pumps since 2004. I was the inaugural chair of the Ground Source Heat Pump Association in the UK for its first 5 years. I've seen a lot of heat pumps. I've seen a lot of installers as well. Those guys that are plumbers installing boilers and show them a heat pump, and they might have a go once. But an even worse breed now are people who are renewables installers that have installed solar and are turning to heat pumps. So we have to be careful. Yeah, I set up Smart Renewable Heat a few years ago with a view to really going after the installation space in the UK. My view is that there's an opportunity to be the lead installer of renewable heat systems, because it requires something new, which I'll go on to. So why? Well, there'll be quite a bit of recap here, which I'm quite pleased that a lot of this has been said before, because it really paves the way. So heat in buildings is the largest single factor in UK domestic energy consumption, and it accounts for 1/3 of UK carbon emissions. I haven't got a great quote for this, but I was at a BASE workshop 3 weeks ago, and I've heard, although I can't track down the actual quote, but the UK government are talking about no new installed fossil fuel devices by the end of the next decade, which is really pleasing to hear. I'd like to see it in black and white, and this was sort of the forerunner to the consultation that they're opening up at the moment. But it does kind of track back to the Paris Accord, and 40% cut in emissions by 2030. So we've got to get to something like that. And I'm really pleased, Mikael, to see the news a few weeks ago of the heat pumps have now overtaken boiler installs, and that was publicised quite well in the UK. It's good to hear. Of course, another driver that is often overlooked is a big issue in the UK is clean air, and the majority of homes that have got gas boilers in just accept having a flue, kicking out fumes, very noxious fumes in the back of the home. And the government's starting to talk about this, and again, it's been talked about quite well. And I think a big driver in this market that we probably we don't appreciate. My wife's had a Nissan Leaf since February, and you don't notice until you start driving an electric vehicle. She's not been to the gas station since February, and not having to get to the petrol pump, stand and fill it up, wash your hands, all of that, it's gone. And I'm pretty convinced, in the same way that we move towards an agriculture and a clean electric type lifestyle, that we will be, we'll be reminiscing to our kids about vinyl and video cassettes, and that we used to pump an explosive gas into our homes and ignite it to heat the home. And I think they'll look at us and think it's crazy. But it's very hard to really sort of see that disruptive vision until you stand there. Now, I find this fascinating, that I've struggled to find how many apprentice plumbers there are in each cohort. There's 500,000 apprentices across all industries in the UK. And I was very fortunate, we've done very well, that Kieran, who works out of my Scottish office, won the 2018 Heating and Ventilating Awards Apprentice of the Year. Now, this is quite special. I know that apprentices don't learn heat pumps because Kieran, who's a very keen footballer, had to give up his Saturdays, voluntarily go and work with a boiler installer, installing boilers in order to pass his apprenticeship. Now, Kieran thinks the future is heat pumps, but one of the factors why he won Apprentice of the Year, but it's crazy. How many thousands of kids now in their early 20s are learning to install gas boilers that in 10 years' time, they're not going to be installing gas boilers, you know? When it's 2030 and they're 32 at the sort of beginning of the peak of their career, they won't have 10 years of experience of the core technology that they're in. This is madness. The grid distribution system rather than the heat distribution system, and as Ian's talked about, you know, the load shifting piece, yes, electric vehicles, electrification of heat, the grid will need investment, but then the grid will always need upkeep and investment. But when you see crazy figures, I think quite often by the fossil fuel lobby, saying, well, you can never have electrification of heat because you need this many power stations. No, load shifting, you can solve all of that. Smart systems, yes, we need some local grid trials working with DNOs, but we can certainly address it because electrified heat can be much smarter. And the UK law is driving that there will be no carbon emissions from heat by 2050. Now, I think still in the UK and in and around the energy landscape in the UK, 2050 is too far off. It doesn't really feel real at the moment. It's just over the horizon, and we all know there's loads of good stuff going on, but it's not there. But actually, when you start to draw a line to 2050, and just consider how long it takes to change things because of retrofitting or switch to, as we call it, there is urgency, there is an agenda if we're going to get on with this. But there is a complex context, and I was talking at the break, you know, when you start to talk about heating in homes, quite naturally you think about your own home, you think about a housing estate, you think about terraced housing, you think about new build construction, you think about existing homes, you maybe think about a landscape over a city. It doesn't take long to work out that it's chopped up into quite a lot of varying different factors. And also, in fact, a graph that I didn't show, when you start to lay the strata of homes that were built over 100 years ago, homes that were built since the 80 years ago, 60 years ago, homes in the last 10 years, there's a lot of niches, there's a lot of opportunity, and as somebody was explaining to me, you know, in the UK, I think the off-gas grid, 15% of homes off gas grid, is more homes than there are in Sweden, you know? So it's still a massive market, but you talk to utilities in the UK, and they say, well, that's off-gas grid, that, you know, we're concerned with the main sector. So it's quite hard to modularise all of this and get drivers towards how do we address the market when the market is enormously fragmented, and when there's a lot of incumbents. There's a lot of incumbent players, all with different interests, different vested interests. One thing that I'm convinced of is that it will require a very different model. Put your head 5 years into the future and think about that energy system. And you know, I'm convinced that when you look at mobile phones and mobile phone technology, you know, we've all got what, a £400 or £500 piece of hardware in our pockets. Now, how quickly would we have seen the cellular grid accelerate if it was dependent on people spending £500 for that piece of technology? But no, it was easy to finance because there was benefit to the consumer in the future. Again, you know, when motor cars went from what, 20–30% population ownership to every home having 2 cars, it was a funding model that did it. And you know, if you're a manufacturer now, you're an incumbent in this, think about the photographic market and where's Kodak, and think about where the once leading player was and how careful you have to be with looking at, you know, as we talked earlier, the different player. And the traditional model, and there's another actor on there, the utility. The utility manufacturer, installer, consumer is not fit for purpose. And my personal view on that is I think it's because over the last 30 to 50 years, the manufacturers have done an excellent job at packaging a piece of technology and making it plug and play, and making it robust and making it insular, so that the building does not matter. Whatever the building looks like to that piece of hardware, it will function. And actually, it's a very good capitalist supply and demand model. So the skills requirement on this guy has been virtually eliminated. His skills are in pipe fitting. He can solder really quickly, high quality, quickly. He is not a heating engineer. He does not understand heat loss. He does not understand what size of radiators are required to match the heat loss and the profile of the building. He might have a gut feel for it if he's been troubleshooting issues in heating systems for a number of years. But normally, troubleshooting an issue in a heating system is turning up the flow temperature. And you can't do that on a renewable heat system, which has got your heat experts, I don't need to tell you. So, standing here talking about how do we get installers to do this, you don't. That installer ain't going to do this. It requires wholesale retraining, it requires a different model, and it requires somebody to own the risk. There is a technical risk in this. Now currently, if you buy a gas boiler, certainly in the UK market, the consumer takes the technical risk, because the plumber comes in and says, I'll sort you out, I'll go to the merchant, I'll get you a good deal, and they'll buy Worcester Bosch, and they'll come home with a Valent or some other, whatever, you know, if they sell 10, they get a free LCD TV screen. So that's what drives the installer. And he puts that in, and he doesn't understand the thermal envelope of the building and what's going on there. Now, heat pumps have got a long way to go in being able to integrate systems and get that level of plug and play involved. So in order to get installers to do this, it's a different installer, it's a different set of training. Now, a lot of installers are practical guys and can understand stuff, but you've got to accelerate their experience and get them to the point where they really appreciate what's going on, and it takes doing it, failing, learning, training, all of those things, which, as Mikael was saying, I'm really pleased with what he said about the German experience, because it's the same in the UK, is the training companies who quite often have got a few ex-apprentice plumbers, 10, 15-year experience of fitting boilers. They then train on boiler installations and they impart their wisdom. Those guys don't exist in heat pumps. So they're not there to impart their wisdom. And we've got a whole cycle to go through for that piece of electrification. So the model that I think is fit for purpose, and this is why I started my business and what I'm pursuing, because I truly believe it requires a disruptive business model. You've got to have expertise in renewable heating systems. And that's not a manufacturer who knows how to make heat pumps. It's an installer who knows how to integrate a heat pump with a building and to integrate the right heat pump for the right situation in the building. And then the core piece that we focus on is online performance monitoring, where you can rectify problems in a boiler by turning the temperature, and you can't do that in a heat pump. What's the worst that can happen with a boiler? So, you know, which manufacturer? Bosch. You know, what's your latest condensing gas boiler operating efficiency.
You mean in the marketing efficiency? Or
Yes,
the
yes, exactly. Because that's the other stick that
I don't know,
comes
150.
150. Well, so you sell at 95%, but if you're lucky, run at 85%. But show me a condensing gas boiler that's installed in the field, a few years old, that's running in condensing mode. And who knows? The consumers don't know, because they're just getting heat and hot water. But, so the worst that can happen is instead of it being on a calculation that allows some fudge, so it's 90% efficient, no, it's at 70% efficient, 65% efficient, it loses 15, 20%. So over a year, over an annual heating cost of 800 quid or 1,000 quid, you're a couple of hundred quid out divided by the months. The consumer doesn't notice. They're maybe paying £10 a month different because that isn't driven right. When you take a heat pump with a SPF of whether it's 2.5, 3.5 or 4.5, and you don't, the analogy that I always use is, you buy a car, if you buy a car for its miles per gallon, and you drive it off the forecourt, and you never leave second gear, and you go 80 miles per hour on a cobbled street into a headwind up a hill with the windows down, you're not going to get the miles per gallon that you bought that car for. And I've had heat pump users coming back to the showroom saying, I bought this because it was supposed to be this fuel efficient. It isn't. And I look at their usage factors and say, well, I can show you why. And so I don't believe this market will truly get to where it needs to get to until that's all done online with digital disruption and handled so that you can intervene and tell the client about how their usage habits are being correct, or that they need to change gear, or even to automatically intervene and to step in and run the heat pump and keep it optimized. And that's what we want to do. What that then enables, in the same way that solar rented roofs financiers are very comfortable with that enables the funder to invest with confidence, and that we can guarantee SPF, we can guarantee performance, we can guarantee return, so the funder knows that it's a packaged model, and they can take their return. The client pays less for their heating year on year, and the installer gets paid for the good system. So that's us essentially. Any questions?
Have you got that offer in the market yet, or how far are you along those lines?
Yeah, so this comes back to this niche offering and micro sectorisation, I suppose. Most of the heat pumps that I sell and install, and I do about 400 a year, are into the self-build sector. So we sell heat pumps to people who are buying a heating system, and most of whom know they want a heat pump that we can show them why a heat pump's sensible. We've been FCA accredited for about 18 months now, so we're able to advise consumers on credit, and we have partners to provide credit, but at the moment that's too expensive until we unlock some volume, which we're talking to a couple of partners about potentially doing that, and that will bring the cost of finance down, which has that effect. Yes. So yes, we have the model, we haven't sold anyone it yet.
Can I ask, so your specialism is in the heat pump area. You were talking about how the installer doesn't know system design within the home, and that you're kind of taking that on now. How are you designing the systems for the customer? Have you got people that you within your team doing that?
Yeah, so you know, we're an installer,
Yeah.
but we provide a turnkey, and the focus of my business is to be leading in sales integration design, you know, the design offer of a heat pump system at volume, and commissioning, making sure that that system does what it was intended to do, because that's what's needed to make this work. So now at the moment, at the scale we're at, we do everything in the middle as well. So we turn up and we install. So we assess the house, we look at the existing system, we specify the right integrated heat pump system for that, and then we sell that, we install it, and we prove that it's doing what it should be doing.
Great.